Imagine walking into a crumbling Roman villa, the dust of centuries still hanging in the air, and suddenly, across the ruined stone, you see color. Vibrant reds, deep blues, glowing yellows, a whole wall alive with scenes of gods, gardens, and myth. Frescoes, painted nearly 2,000 years ago, yet somehow still radiating a sense of life. The big mystery? How did the ancients create something so durable, so intense, and so full of artistic soul? Techniques that even modern science is still trying to decode? Today, we're diving into the lost secrets of ancient fresco painting, and by the end of this journey, you'll see walls in Pompeii, Knossos, and even the Vatican with completely new eyes. The fresco, literally meaning fresh in Italian, was more than just decoration. It was the heartbeat of ancient spaces, homes, temples, tombs. Entire societies wrapped their walls in stories told through lime plaster and mineral pigments. But what makes frescoes so fascinating is not just their beauty, it's the process itself. The artists painted directly onto wet plaster, so the colors didn't just sit on the surface. They fused into the wall itself. That's why some of these works have survived earthquakes, fires, even volcanic eruptions. Fresco painting wasn't just art, it was alchemy. One of the best places to see this alchemy is Pompeii. Imagine 79 AD, Mount Vesuvius erupts, freezing an entire city in time. Amid the ash and destruction, entire rooms of frescoes were preserved. Mythological scenes of Venus, Dionysus, cupids flying through painted gardens. Scholars still puzzle over how the pigments remain so fresh. Modern analysis reveals the Romans used volcanic minerals, ground so finely they formed a chemical bond with the plaster. In other words, the disaster that destroyed the city also preserved its art. Nature and human technique collided in the most unexpected way. But Rome wasn't the beginning. To uncover the true roots of fresco, we have to travel back even further. To the island of Crete, the Palace of Knossos, nearly 3,500 years old, is home to some of the most famous Minoan frescoes. These images, dolphins swimming above doorways, bull-leaping athletes in mid-flight, feel surprisingly modern. The lines are fluid, the colors alive. The Minoans developed a style that combined speed with precision, painting quickly before the plaster dried, using natural pigments like Egyptian blue, one of the first synthetic colors ever invented. When you look at those dolphins dancing across the plaster, you realize you're staring into the very birth of Western art. What's astonishing is that despite the passage of millennia, the same techniques kept reappearing in different cultures. In Etruscan tombs in Italy, you find banquets and dancers painted with a confidence that feels almost celebratory. In Egypt, fresco-like wall paintings filled the tombs of the Valley of the Kings, where entire afterlives were imagined in pigment. The secret here was consistency, plaster, pigment, speed, but also something deeper. A sense that painting wasn't just aesthetic, it was spiritual. Frescoes weren't merely wall art. They were a bridge between worlds, between the living and the divine. Of course, when we think fresco, we also think of the Renaissance, Michelangelo lying on his back in the Sistine Chapel, brush in hand, racing against the plaster as it dried above him. But here's the kicker. Michelangelo didn't invent fresco. He was standing on the shoulders of the ancients. What makes his work in the Sistine Chapel so extraordinary is how he revived techniques long forgotten, and how he pushed them to their limits. The intense blues of the Last Judgment, the muscular forms of the prophets and sibyls, all of it was made possible by the same ancient process that decorated Pompeii's villas. Michelangelo wasn't just an artist. He was an archaeologist of lost techniques. So what were these techniques exactly? First, the plaster itself, made of lime and sand, applied in multiple layers. The final smooth coat was painted while still damp, so the pigment fused chemically with the lime. The pigments, derived from minerals like cinnabar, ochre, and malachite. These weren't just colors, they were geological time, crushed and transformed into vision. And third, the tools. Brushes made from animal hair, sponges, even fingers. Imagine the intimacy of that. A painter literally pressing color into the wall with their own hand. But here's where the mystery deepens. Archaeologists have discovered frescoes that seem to have an almost glass-like surface, suggesting a final treatment we no longer fully understand. Was it a secret resin? A wax coating? Some scholars suggest the ancients used egg yolk or milk proteins to give their walls extra sheen. Others believe volcanic ash itself created a natural seal. These details remain some of the greatest unsolved riddles in art history. What's certain is that the ancients knew things about chemistry, material science, and artistry that we're still trying to catch up to. Standing in Pompeii today, you notice something strange. The frescoes don't feel like they belong to the past. They feel alive. The room of the Villa of the Mysteries, with its life-size red-painted figures, pulls you into a mysterious ritual. Are we witnessing an initiation ceremony or perhaps a secret Dionysian cult? The fresco doesn't give answers. It invites questions. That is the power of this medium. Frescoes don't just decorate walls, they make the walls themselves speak. In Herculaneum, another city buried by Vesuvius, the walls are even more stunning. Intense black panels, delicate golden ornaments, landscapes that seem to open up into entire worlds. You feel like you could step right through them. These weren't just decorations, they were portals. Imagine living in a room where every wall was an illusion, a painted window into gardens, cities, myths. For the Romans, this wasn't fantasy, it was normal. And it shows how art shaped the way they understood their place in the universe. But fresco painting wasn't confined to Europe. Across the world, we find echoes of the technique. In India's Ajanta caves, Buddhist monks painted entire cave walls with fresco-like murals, telling the stories of the Jataka tales, lives of the Buddha, rich with golds, blues, and reds. In the Mayan city of Bonampak, vibrant frescoes reveal royal ceremonies and battles, so alive that you can still feel the rhythm of drums. These global parallels show that humans everywhere discovered the same truth. Walls aren't just boundaries, they're canvases for the imagination. So why did fresco painting fade away? Ironically, its own demands may have doomed it. The process was unforgiving. You had to work fast. You couldn't correct mistakes easily. And once the plaster dried, it was set forever. Over time, oil painting offered more flexibility, more layers, more freedom, but something was lost. Oil paint can be scraped away, redone, softened. Fresco, it's final. Every stroke was a gamble. Every gesture was a commitment. And that's why frescoes feel so alive. They're the record of risk, of urgency, of artists literally racing against time. Today, scientists use lasers, X-rays, and even synchrotrons to analyze fresco pigments. They've found microscopic crystals of rare minerals, traces of organic binders, and even tiny fingerprints left by artists thousands of years ago. Imagine that. The ghost of a hand, pressed into plaster, surviving through centuries. It reminds us that these weren't just nameless artisans. They were people, individuals who lived, loved, and poured themselves into walls that still whisper to us today. When you next stand before a fresco, whether in a museum, a ruined villa, or a hidden chapel, look closer. Notice the brushstrokes, the cracks, the shimmer of color. Ask yourself, how much of this is science and how much is magic? The truth is, the lost techniques of ancient frescoes may never be fully recovered. And maybe that's the point. Art isn't meant to be entirely solved, it's meant to be felt. So the next time you hear someone dismiss old wall paintings as just decoration, remember this. Frescoes are time machines. They collapse centuries, letting us see through ancient eyes. They are the whispers of civilizations, painted in stone, pigment, and spirit. And though their secrets may remain partly hidden, the impact is undeniable. Ancient frescoes aren't just art, they're humanity, preserved in color.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button. It really helps the channel grow. Feel free to share it with a friend who loves a good mystery. And if you haven't already, please subscribe so you won't miss the next story. There's a lot more to uncover, and I'd love to have you along for the journey.